So a call to order the meeting of the Newcastle Town Environmental Review Board for February 27th, 2023. First, well, before we get into the agenda, a couple of notes. Everybody will notice that because of the forecasted weather, we've moved the meeting to Zoom. However, in view of the fact that the New York State COVID emergency orders were recently lifted, along with them all of the exceptions to the public officers law and open meetings law, allowing Zoom meetings of public entities. Technically, this is not a formal meeting of the ERB. We are required at this point to be meeting with at least a quorum of the members in person. But rather than put everything off a month, given the fact that we have a pretty packed agenda tonight, Dennis is thinking, which I think we all concurred with, was that it would be better to even have a legally informal gathering where we could review the applications, discuss them, ask any questions about them, so that by the time we're able to reassemble with a legal quorum for action, hopefully those applications will have been tweaked, modified, amended as necessary, so that they'll be in shape to be given final approval at the next meeting. That's the thought. We appreciate everybody's indulgence, and you know, on behalf of somebody who's 900 miles away at this point, congratulations on all of you getting your first snowfall of the year. Next is, again, before we get into the review of the minutes, I just want to let everybody know that I appreciate the indulgence of the last meeting, where I kind of took a powder on short notice in the middle of the meeting. Apologize. There was a family emergency that needed to be dealt with, and I see from the minutes that you guys were able to continue in my absence, and no time was lost, and the additional application was considered and approved. So,
rest assured, John, it wasn't the same.
I'm sure it wasn't. Anyway, I appreciate the indulgence. So, that having been said, I'll entertain a motion to.
I don't think we can do business because we're not an official meeting, right?
That is true. That is true. But so let me just ask if anybody had any comments or questions on the minutes. I had a few typos, clarifications, nothing terribly substantive. The only thing of real substance, it looks like one of the applications was missing an address on page 4, and I suggest that something be added to the minutes at the conclusion of the consideration of the last item, to note that I did not participate in the discussion or determination of this item due to an absence as a result of a family emergency. But again, I have a slight markup of the typos, et cetera, that I will scan to Dennis, and he can forward for review and modification. Anybody else have anything on the minutes?
No.
Nope. Nope. Okay. Then let's proceed. Dennis, first item is 10 Grey Rock Park.
Yes.
Okay. And who's here on behalf of the applicants?
So I'm the architect, James Coleman, and Scott Rose, the owner, is joining us as well.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And I will share my screen if that's helpful.
Sure.
Does everyone see the screen?
Yes.
So this is the drawing that we submitted to you. We filed a few months ago for permit and discovered that there is a wetlands area beyond the existing fence back of the property. We had a soil scientist come out and flag the wetland area, and we're proposing some construction right here at the back of the house. This is the existing back of the house, yard sloping down to the rear fence. This is the fence at the back corner, and this is the wetlands area over here. And what we're proposing is, this is the existing deck. We're proposing a new low deck and a gravel sort of recreational area. The wetland buffer, the 100-foot buffer, is sort of right through here. So the spa is outside the buffer, but we do have this disturbance of about 550 square feet within the buffer. So looking at this, this is the existing house and existing deck. This is the low deck we're proposing in the gravel area. And then we're 83 feet from this corner of the gravel area to the buffer. And we're proposing a little more area than we're encroaching for mitigation. We met with the soil scientist and we've discussed this with Dennis.
I mean, it's 83 feet to the wetland.
To the wetland, yes, yeah. And then we're proposing inside this fence, cleaning up this area where there's some brush and putting in a series of shrubs, a mix of shrubs that were suggested by the soil scientists to create a natural filter for any, runoff from the yard. And that's basically the project. This is the area of concern right here and how we're mitigating it here. So happy to answer any questions.
So
Do you know what kind of vegetation that is beyond the fence? In that last photo?
This area here,
Yeah,
I don't know what Mary, the soil scientist, didn't identify what those plants were. I could certainly find out. Actually, let me see if she did say in her report.
I'm just wondering if it's just a mess of invasives, which it's hard to tell this time of year, but.
Right. So what I could say is there are a couple things, because I agree I didn't receive Mary's report, but it's interesting when you can go back to the fence photo. Jim, maybe I could just try to
Sure.
help and talk.
And I do have her report right here as well. Let me see here.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, definitely send that to me, because I'm going to include that as part of the file.
Okay.
This delineation line wasn't that difficult to establish, because a little bit past the fence line,
It is.
you certainly drop in contour. And so it's interesting, because if you look at his upper left-hand aerial, which shows the contour lines, it kind of follows probably not the very last one that cuts through the corner of the property, but second to last one, approximately, following that. And so I did take a look at the area where they were proposing mitigation. I mean, obviously, it looked to me like historically probably used as the bit of a leaf dump. It's a little bit thicker than you would expect just from the trees that were dropping, the leaves that you could see that are in that area. And I did make a note that I think I agree that it is a little tougher outside the growing season, but from the coloration of the bark of the smaller specimens that were emerging, I think it was possibly mulberry. There's like an orange tinge to them, and that's all from China. So it really is nothing of nativeness in that area. So when I kind of saw that they were proposing it in that area, I thought it was good. I also thought it was good that they were keeping it to the inside of the fence because they would have more control over, you know, sort of the maintenance going forward. And if they wanted to do some herbivory protection so the deer don't get to them, you know, it may help to facilitate that as well. So it kind of checked a bunch of boxes for me, at least from, you know, citing and proposing an approach for mitigation.
And I do have, I'm sorry, I can't move Mary's report over to the screen, but the wetland supports reed canary grass, occasional red maple, phragmites, sensitive fern, and brambles.
So
In this area.
The existing chain link fence is not on the property line?
No, it's inside. Here's the property line back here,
Right,
and this existing fence is it's 123 feet to the property line and about 80 feet to the fence.
so was the fence originally built as deer protection, or why would it not have been, I don't notice a pool or anything, why would it not have gone to the property line?
It's a bit of a drop after that first step,
Yeah,
as they say.
you can see the contours. This is sort of the edge of the lawn here.
Mhm.
See, go to the GIS. So the existing fencing is here, so it does drop off into this wetlands area. And it's not landscaped. Let me see better here. This is sort of the edge of the lawn, and that's where the fence is. And that was, I think, Scott, you purchased the property in the last couple of years, and this was all existing.
Correct. I purchased it 3 years ago. Yeah.
And it's the backyard is fenced, and there's a motorized gate at the drive here. So the entire backyard is fenced.
That bodes well for whatever you're gonna plant there, so.
Right, that's right. That we're hoping it will stay.
Yep.
Not be eaten by the deer.
Okay. And the proposed gravel area,
Yes.
how is that going to be constructed? Is it going to be some kind of bed under the gravel, or just gravel over soil, or what?
Yeah, so we won't want planting coming through that. So we're going to do solid edging, and probably a rougher gravel bed, and then a finer sort of pea stone gravel that's sort of comfortable to walk on. And then we're putting back in pavers to get from the drive to the floor deck and to the back door. That'll be set of the gravel.
That kind of pathway that's marked, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, but other than the pathway, it'll be completely permeable?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
With then there's just a low stone wall at this edge, just to
Right.
define that corner.
Kind of a knee wall.
Yeah, it's only like, that's actually something you could sit on, is the idea.
Dennis, did you review the list of plantings that are proposed?
Yes.
They meet with your approval?
Yes. No issue with that.
Okay.
My only comment is, because I know they say winterberry, typically when they're installed, the landscapers know this, or the suppliers know this. They're the type of species that you need male, female, because they're separate plants, monoecious. So just make sure that you have that if you'd like to see some fruiting, because only the females will fruit, but you need the males to help facilitate that. So I think that's my only comment that wasn't specified, but that's something that obviously could be accommodated at the time of planting.
Great.
Question on the low deck, is that going to be a a wood or synthetic material deck?
Yeah, it'll be Trex,
Solid.
right, Trex decking. And then we're replacing the decking and railings on the existing deck to match. But that will also will be gravel underneath.
Okay.
Dennis, are there any restrictions? I know it's technically not our jurisdiction, but does the building department care at all about the details of the construction of that outdoor kitchen in the grill area?
Yeah, I believe the building inspector will, require, whatever those specifications are in terms of, various connections, because whatever the fuel source is going to be, and, that'll require whatever for plumbing or electric or whatnot. So, yes.
So we actually, we didn't discover the wetlands until we'd submitted for a building permit. So the building inspector has seen this. We submitted to the engineering department for a backflow preventer, and are providing all the cuts and details on the equipment and construction of the outdoor grill. So as soon as we get our wetlands permit, we're hoping to be able to quickly move into construction in the spring.
Okay. And I know we have several applications tonight dealing with this kind of construction, but this application doesn't include anything with respect to like a fire pit?
Well, you know what? We did have a fire pit originally, and we've taken it out. We're not building a fire pit. We may do a, and we run it by the building inspector, a fire pit that you can just buy. That's a UL listed or a rated product.
You mean like one of the, oh no,
It's sold by Restoration Hardware, I believe.
something that's gas operated or?
Correct, right, yeah, it's LP gas, so it's not a wood burning fire pit. That was part of our review with,
And where would that go? Right, presumably on the gravel?
yes, in the gravel, correct, so then this, let's see here, let me just pull up that, permit. So this was the original, these are all the details of the construction of the deck and the sections through this, all that's been submitted and will be resubmitted for final approval to the building inspector. So we got comments back from them already.
Okay. Anybody else? David, Ivan, Ted?
Nope.
No, John, nothing here.
Okay.
I
Nothing.
just have, sorry, one clarification since I'm a botanical geek. Winterberry is actually dioecious. Monoecious is if it had both male and female parts. Since this is being recorded, I better sound like I know what the hell I'm talking about. Thank you.
Okay.
And is it possible to take, I know this is not an official meeting, but to have sort of a straw poll? Because we'd like to move forward unless there's, issues or if there's anything more you'd like to see.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by moving forward, because I think you heard that nobody on the board has additional questions or comments at this point. I think we're probably pretty satisfied with this, and barring some unforeseen change to the plans between now and the next meeting, I would expect that this would be subject to a pretty quick approval.
Okay, thank you.
But again, that doesn't authorize any work in the interim.
No, we understand. Yep.
Great.
Thank you all for your time and consideration, and except for the gentleman who's 900 miles away, stay safe in the snow.
You too. Good luck.
Thank you. We'll see you next month. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll try not to drown in the ocean. Next. 6 Killington Street.
Hello. I'm Philip Holland, the architect representing my client, 6 Killington, this project. And I can share my screen to facilitate the discussion.
Sure.
David, I think we're getting an echo and it looks like it's you because you keep lighting up. You want to mute, maybe?
Sure. Okay, so to give a brief description of the project, we are proposing to build a porch over an existing patio that exists on the site. I'll show you an image from the ARB presentation. So behind the house, currently there's a small patio, which when we filed the application, Dennis noted that it was unreviewed by the ARB. So ERB, sorry. So therefore, when we are now applying, it's considered all to be new construction. The current deck, the patio is on grade, and it is within the wetlands buffer. The entire house is within the wetland buffer that was flagged by Otto Thiel, which runs through the backyard. So therefore, a new area has to be reviewed. We are proposing, so I'll go back to the image here. The house was purchased a few years ago, I believe about 4 or 5 years ago. It has really beautiful landscaping. The owner takes great pride in that, to maintain that. So all the work that we're proposing will be hand excavated, and not in order to not disturb this area in as much as possible, and the adjacent planting. However, down the hill from the property, we have, and this is a view from the looking down, we have wetland area, and it was flagged sort of in this area here. So the bottom is a little damp. When we visited with Dennis, it was visibly sort of a little damp, and there's invasive Phragmites species in the area. And we thought that the best place to really restore the wetland was sort of through this watercourse area, which appears to have sort of these mounds. I guess they're firm and they've been grassed over and currently being mowed by the owner, who sort of goes against the principles of a wetland area to be. So we are proposing to restore the area in the back of the yard here. What I would say on the water, in the water course, and if you have a look at the site plan, the water course sort of splits into two along here and goes around this island. So we would like to see this area to be restored as a wetland. And then what did involve some discussion is how to deal with the existing Phragmites. That the Phragmites extends across a number of properties off neighboring properties. And this really is a small area, a small area at the end of the property. It sort of extends out into neighboring areas. So what we'd like to do is control the spread of it in as much as possible. Originally, we looked at the complete removal of it up to this fence line that exists here. But the landscape architect, and I think Dennis as well, believe that it may be futile, and the best thing is to just create a buffer in between the area and existing Phragmites to prevent its spread in as much as possible. So when I will show you the landscape plan. We're actually proposing to maintain a strip of the lawn in that spot, as the belief is that it won't cross over it. There's some optional boulders if there's any on the site. We can move into that area and then plant a pin oak tree, and then propose 1,000 square feet of mitigation through that watercourse area. And I think the owner is actually pretty happy with the direction of that, because it does begin to create a natural environment through this area rather than having sort of mowed strip, which just doesn't appear to make much sense. But that's the proposal, and I can happily answer any more questions regarding what we're planning to build as well.
So this is a rendering of what the new work will look like?
This is a rendering of what the new work would look like. Currently, it looks like that. There's just a patio there. And this would be the new work.
Will the footprint be changed?
So we are adding about 120 square foot of additional stone patio in this location, because currently it sort of is behind this. No, currently it exists here and then tapers off that way. So we are adding this block here just as a landing with a stair, and then so you could enter into this covered porch area, which is just over the existing patio.
But the entire existing area inside the pillars for the raised deck is already existing patio?
That's existing patio. We are extending out over to the side, but that won't be covered in any way. That's just impervious. In this location, it will be a covered patio where the runoff will be controlled through a Trex rain escape system, and it's approximately 400 feet, which will be taken out into a perforated drain and a gravel bed in around this area here.
Okay, could you take us back to the plan view and go through that?
So, just trying to put the best plan here. So this is a plan of the deck. Currently, there's a wraparound deck that extends up to here. As part of the project, we're also enclosing this office area, which the existing deck is within this portion here. So we will enclose this part and create a room, although that's within the footprint of the existing building. And then this wraparound deck will be connected to this new deck portion here. However, only a portion of it here will be covered with a stair. And this part will be open to below. Currently there's a flagstone path and some mechanical equipment in this location. And so we're hoping these footings, existing planter bed here, to be protected during construction, and we're hoping to maintain that in as much as possible. So what we're adding is really this location here, whilst this is existing patio in that spot. There'll be some will be removed to put the footings and then replaced, because it works well with the current layout of the house. There's already a sliding door there, and the client's looking for a screened-in porch to avoid mosquitoes and bugs, I guess, and probably there because of the wetland. So this is the part that we're proposing to infill, and we've received, we've gone through the ARB process for that. We've submitted construction drawings, but and then we'll connect the new deck up to this section.
But underneath the old deck, underneath that existing deck is not going to change?
It's not changing. It's currently driveway. It's currently existing driveway.
The bluestone is over gravel, so that, or is it a concrete base below?
Currently, the bluestone is on a concrete base.
And is that what's proposed for the new piece also?
Yes, we're proposing to maintain this, as much of that bluestone as possible to avoid the expense of rebuilding it. Things will go off just to the side, and some of it will inevitably be damaged, but we would repair it and try and maintain, again, just to not rebuild the patio. And we'll integrate a section here into that part.
The area that you're going to put a roof over the existing deck and drive, is that going to require new footings or?
No, this section is an overhang. So the footings will be, this is the section here, and it's currently overhanging, and it's structurally stable. We're just proposing new work off to the side there.
That'll support the new construction above it?
Yes. Well, this part isn't changed. In this section, all we'll do is change the railing and the padding of the deck. This is all structurally sound, and it supports. It's sufficient for its current purpose. So we're not proposing things.
So my question is, there's no more disturbance below grade for the roof over that deck, according to the current plans?
Correct. The disturbance is in this spot here and in where the new landing is to occur.
Okay.
Dennis,
Yes.
thoughts about the planting plan, the remediation ideas?
Sure. So I reviewed the plan, and I visited the site. And yeah, I'm in agreement. They happen to have just, this small incursion of this much more massive frag stand that extends onto the other property, I guess, northwestward. So it would be futile to just sit and focus on, trying to eliminate that spot. So I'm in support of trying to keep, sort of like a mechanically maintained barrier between sort of that from encroaching any further and, where they're proposing their planting. So that was fine. The comment that I had.
Is your sense that the Phragmites had been encroaching gradually into the property? Or no?
It's always a possibility. Let's just say that. I think it starts to peter out at that point, which is nice. And I'm okay with keeping it at that spot for whatever reason. Obviously all these properties that, move northward. There is, a mowing that occurs, which, obviously keeps your lawn maintained. And then when you get to the spot where you can't mow anymore, whether because it's too wet or because it's just too overgrown. But on this property, they're fortunate that they just have that little spot. And again, I don't think it's quite as dense as it is on the adjacent property. So no need to mess with it, for lack of a better word. If it wants to peter out and that's all it wants to encroach onto this property, I'm okay with. Fine. Don't mess with it so that we don't make it maybe worse or more aggressive.
And
But
nothing,
I think
nothing needs to be done to create some kind of hard border?
Well, I think not necessarily. I think what they're proposing there to sort of just, keep that area maintained from a mowing perspective should be helpful, again, because of the existing conditions of that tail end of the Phragmites stand, if you want to call it that, and looking at it from this property. My only comment on it with respect to the letter is that I think obviously going forward, since the applicants are obviously, they do have, obviously a attentive landscaping on the property. I'm okay with the 2-year plan, but you're going to probably have to do some form of adaptive management going forward. So, at maybe the same frequency or more infrequent mows, but anytime that you see anything that's trying to spread, because they go through rhizomes, you're gonna want to keep whacking that. So that's fine. And then I guess getting to the mitigation proper, I just asked for clarification with respect to the oak species, because it was pin oak on the plans and it's swamp white in the correspondence. Frankly, I'm open to either, so I don't have an issue with either species. And again, maybe upon when you're ready to install, if you like, the look of nursery stock of one over the other, you're free to go back and forth if you want. My only comment based on existing conditions was actually to the herb layer, because I don't have a problem with Joe Pyeweed and blue flag iris, but I happen to notice growing in the Phragmites by the fence and actually to the other side, you had 2 species of fern that I think, naturally recruited. One looked like to me ostrich fern, and the other I believe is marsh fern. And that's, something you may want to consider. Sometimes I just listen to what the site is telling me, as they say, and that, I thought was an interesting observation. And it looked like the owners of the property themselves, I think they've, I believe it was Christmas fern, looks like it's planted based on its spacing. And there was another species that I think is, I believe it was sweet fern. I think that's something you could purchase in landscape, but that was, just of note. I'm like, that's 4 different species of fern that I see on this property that seem to be doing pretty good. And ferns tend to be deer resistant. So I thought it had a nice, value add, even to the property owners, that they wouldn't have to worry as much about their plantings being, at least those particular ones being eaten. So those were just my general comments. Again, I was okay with the concept and the approach and the location. I think it did make a lot of sense to not continue to maintain that area as turf cover, and definitely can be absorbed into and or part of the immediately adjacent, woodland, landscape that happens to exist at that transition.
Okay, it looked to me like there had been in the wetland, the watercourse area itself, some scouring. Was I correct in seeing that, Dennis? Over here?
You're talking from the woods where there was like another.
The part that. No, I guess that's all planted. Is that a bed?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
There's the water course runs through a gravel bed. I'm not sure if it was placed there to sort of control that.
But this is actually. I don't know if you're seeing my arrow or not, but this, yeah, that area is actually a planted bed though, right?
This is a planted bed.
Okay, when I first looked at it, it looked like it was the watercourse had been subject to some scouring or erosion.
The water
okay.
course runs just above it, and really, we're at the top of the hill, so I guess it doesn't really.
Okay.
Water itself is contained. The owners have noted that the water is generally contained to at most a trickle or just through that area, just because of the location.
Ignore the question. Anybody else? Ivan, Ted, David, questions? Okay.
Nothing further from me, Tom.
All right, then I guess the only suggestion would be, that in the interim, I think, again, we don't have any major issues with this. And would likely be able to be pretty quickly approved at the next meeting. I would suggest though that the applicant, in the interim, continue to talk to Dennis and, consider his suggestions on the plantings and have further conversations and flesh it out so that we're at the point at the next meeting that we can do this.
Sure. I will speak to the landscape architect who selected the species to maybe get a little bit more feedback and find out what his opinions are on ostrich or marsh fern that's present on the site. And if we have any changes, I guess I would have him write a letter that clarifies that. But and I will discuss with Dennis prior to that. But if there are no changes, I'll let you know. So just from an administrative perspective, someone is required to attend the next meeting for this property, since this one isn't an official meeting.
I don't know actually whether we actually need anybody to appear. Especially if there are no changes to the plan between now and then. If there are conversations with Dennis in the interim, he would be able to bring those to our attention and,
okay.
We always welcome participation and attendance, but I don't think it would necessarily be mandatory at this point. Again, unless there are any changes that precipitate additional questions that we would have.
Sure. I do have a open line of communication with Dennis. So we'll discuss the project further as required. But thank you for your review. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
3 Melanie Lane.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alan Pilch.
Mr. Pilch, good evening. How are you?
Good, how are you? Thank you
Good.
for holding this meeting, and hello to all the members of the ERB.
Thank you for your indulgence.
Perhaps I could manage to share a screen.
Sure.
Hopefully you can see that. So I'll just start off this way, if I might. The property itself, whoops, let me do that. Now I've done it. 3 Melanie Drive, this is Quaker Road. Chapel Mountain Road, located here, and 3 Melanie Drive is located there.
Mhm.
And so this property itself, I'll just point it out. So access comes in this way, and there's a wetland area behind here. It's actually a state wetland and a
State
town
wetland, yep.
wetland. So this is the site plan for it. I'll just say, so the site plan involves several things. One is replacing the floorboards on an existing deck, and I can show pictures of this. Expansion of the wood deck along the rear facade of the house. An expansion of an existing flagstone patio. Maybe I could just show you a picture. That's the existing flagstone patio in the backyard. It's kind of a small feature, that I would say.
Mhm.
That's the rear facade of the house. That's the existing deck. And that patio is located here at the exit from the door. And this proposal is to basically extend the deck along the rear facade of the house. And then there'll be some steps down from the, this is actually, because there's quite a grade change across the property. This is actually the first floor of the house in the lower level. So it will actually just extend to here. So the access from the deck to the patio will be via steps, and that's what's shown on this plan here. And so that's essentially what the proposal is. As I noted too, that this is freshwater wetland 08. We did do a wetland permit application to the New York State DEC, along with applying to your board. So it's proposed to expand, we're proposing to expand the existing 177 square foot deck by 423 square feet. And I'll just say at its closest point, the deck will be 64 feet from the wetland. And it's also proposed to expand the existing patio. I think it shows a little better on here. That's the expansion of the deck. Those are the steps which go from the, from the deck down to the level of the patio. That's the existing patio. I propose to expand it by 156 square feet. The patio would be 67 feet from the wetland at its closest point. So there's no direct wetland impacts, but since the deck is up high, the only impact really is the supports for the decking, because it's connected to the house at this edge, and the deck piers here would support it and be lawn underneath here, just as there's lawn underneath this portion of the deck here too. And I'll just show you. I'll go into that in a moment. That's the view of the existing deck. You can see some of the lawn that's underneath it as well. As for mitigation,
Are those
Yes.
existing supports sufficient?
it'll be reconstructed.
Okay.
There's quite a bit of new construction. There's 5 piers for the new deck for the reconstruction, and because it really does need some work.
Have you been to the ARB on that yet?
Tim Lenner is the architect on it, and I would have to inquire with him.
Okay.
I'll just say that for proposed mitigation, we are proposing an area of 325 square feet for mitigation, essentially along the pathway, if you will, of where the driveway drains, past an existing picket fence. And I'll just point out again, as you've encountered before, there's an area of Phragmites beyond it. And so the planting area is proposed here. There's actually that gate, which is here. So we're proposing to plant this area here and leave a strip of lawn for the control of Phragmites. And so that's the proposal for 3 Melanie Drive. And if there's any questions or comments.
So the strip, that strip would not encroach on the wetland itself?
No, it would not. It's in a mown lawn area.
Mhm.
So that strip is actually here.
Right.
See the gate there, and that's the existing picket fence, which is here. There's a gate there, and that's where the mitigation is proposed.
And no, I just didn't know how that existing mowed area related to where the flagged limit of the wetland might be.
Right, it's about maybe 10, 12 feet beyond it.
Okay.
It's where the wetland boundary is.
So what's the status of the application with DEC?
They have the application, and they are reviewing it. That was about 3 weeks ago, the word I had from them. So I would hope that we will be able to have any comments from DEC shortly.
Okay, so presumably we could have the benefit of those comments prior to our next meeting.
I will endeavor to have that occur.
Okay. Because we haven't done very many of these recently where the same project is subject to both jurisdictions.
Understood.
And I'll have to check, exactly, how the applicable procedures work between now and then. But, I mean, generally speaking, we would want to jump in holding hands with DEC.
Yes. Yes, so it'd be obviously advantageous to have some comments or conclusions out of DEC prior to the next meeting of
Right.
your board.
Okay.
So as I said, that's existing. The patio itself will be it'll be reconstructed, as you saw from the photograph. It could use a little bit of help, but that's what's being proposed here. And then just the extension of the upper level, because there's quite a bit of grade change between the first floor of this house and the lower level. So this will be the upper level and lawn underneath it.
Okay, so the only new disturbance really would be the supports for the new portion of the deck.
Plus the
Plus
expansion of the
The
patio.
expansion of the patio.
Correct. And there were plants that were identified as well. Red osier dogwood, inkberry, winterberry, spice bush, and a couple of ferns. That's what's being proposed in the mitigation planting area.
Questions, comments?
Dennis, do you have any opinion about the location of the mitigation area?
So, yeah, my only, Alan, do you mind going back to the photo that showed the wetland?
This
That
one?
Yeah. Right, so that's a growing season photo, right? So, yeah, it's funny because there is some frag in that wetland, but like that's more cattail there, which I'm okay with. I know some people feel it kind of can take over, but it hasn't been labeled as the I word yet, so I'm not going down that road. So I was
Pretty close,
just wondering. I'm sorry.
it's pretty close to being invasive, but
Yeah, I know, but it hasn't been classified as
I
that
know,
yet,
I
so
know.
that's why
Okay.
I'm trying to avoid
yeah,
that.
no, I can see there are some cattails in here, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I was just asking, I guess, for the benefit of the owners, like from from the perspective of the plan, if you wanted to kind of move it closer to the wetland, like I had noticed, there was it was easier to pick up at this time of the year because of some of the dieback, but there's like tussock sedge actually also kind of growing in that wetland area. So I was like, if it made more sense, not only maybe from like a mitigation perspective to actually, push that sort of back closer to the wetland itself, but even from the perspective of, obviously in keeping this fencing, if there's, issue that, there'll be trimming or over trimming because there's concerns about, it impacting or impinging on the fence. I'm like, well, then I would be okay with, moving it further away from the fence and closer to the wetland. And if you wanted to keep, an even narrower strip just in case, I think that would be fine. And if you wanted to, again, sort of echoing back to the last applicant, no problem if you wanted to, just throw in some tussock sedge because it looks like it would work, just based on, sort of what's existing if you wanted to substitute for any of the ferns or something to that effect. So those were my only two sort of discussion points. I'm not necessarily married to one or the other, but the remnant brag that I observed, it just seemed more scattered and less dense in this particular wetland. I know it gets pretty wet. There's definitely a fair amount of inundation for certain times of the year, and if that gets to a certain level, then that definitely helps to, hold back some of the frag. It's not quite as dense as when it gets less shallow and or it's just saturated and it's taken hold. So I was just an observation I had made when I was out there.
That's fine, I can certainly make that modification, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I, again, even if you want to, if your client doesn't care one way or the other, then I think the preference would be closer to the wetland. If they had some preference because they wanted to see the plantings closer to the fence, or I was just curious, that's all. Because I know a lot of times when stuff starts going through fences, that's when you see all the weed whackers come out. So that's why I was asking, that's all.
Right. We'll discuss it with them and address it appropriately. I appreciate the comment.
Thank you. That was all I have.
So Dennis, would you, in a situation like this, expect at all to be in touch with DEC to coordinate the two applications, or no?
Funny you should ask. So, and I believe it was the same very licensed professional, Mr. Pilch, who was involved with 16 Glen Terrace, which also required a DEC permit.
Yep.
And unfortunately, that meeting, the recording did not work. But what I try to do, and I had mentioned this to the applicant who actually, voiced her opinion. I remember during that meeting, I said, I try to hold off, for lack of a better word, because I know DEC's review time and turnaround time is going to be slower than Newcastle's. So from an administrative perspective, I just try to hold off on, issuing the final wetlands permit from a Newcastle perspective under that category, so that
Right.
the applicant's not holding a permit that just had 3 months of time expire and they couldn't do anything to advance their project because they're waiting on DEC. But also from the perspective of what you're suggesting, if anything comes out of that review where DEC, has a concern or a comment that I'm not aware of, we, if Alan doesn't happen to share that with us, I know that the town clerk gets copies of those permits and then forwards them to me as well. So one way or the other, we try to accommodate that as you suggest, John, but it's not so direct as in that DC and I'm representative from DEC and I are in direct contact with each other.
Mhm. Okay. But certainly, once we hear back in whatever form, in terms of DEC's comments, if you did have questions or the need or the desire to discuss with them, would that be something that they would entertain?
I really haven't experienced that. It's more the other way around. It's myself reaching out to them at times.
Well,
Not
that's what I mean.
necessarily for this, but yes.
That's what I mean. If you had questions, and would they entertain, a conversation with you?
Yes,
Not-
yes. I got you.
I wouldn't expect them necessarily to be reaching out to you,
Yeah, definitely not. Okay. Gotcha.
But you think they would be amenable if you reached out? If you had something that you wanted to discuss with them?
Sure they would.
Yes, yes. And I think at that point, I think they're appreciative, at times of the local knowledge if it becomes,
Well, that's what
something of a point or an issue. Yes.
That's what I would think. Okay. But again, I mean, this looks like a relatively small area that we're discussing. So I don't know whether anything is gonna come up at all. Although, the property does back up directly on the state wetland, so, they may have concerns that go beyond just this one small area that, Alan is suggesting planting. Okay, anybody else? Questions, comments? Okay, so then this is a situation where actually the delay really won't hurt anybody. And hopefully we will be able to get some usable intelligence from DEC before the next meeting. All right. Alan, thank you.
Thank you.
Although I guess you're on the next one also, right?
Am indeed.
Two 48 Quaker Street.
Right.
Okay.
Perhaps I can share my
You're up
screen.
again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the ERB. I can see also with me are Ethan and Ethan Covey and Rachel Van Dolson are with me as well. I just saw them here before.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah,
Good evening, everyone.
they're over on the side.
And so
Welcome.
they are the owners of the property, and thank you for being here. So perhaps what I could do is, you probably know this property is on the west side of Quaker Street. It's adjacent to I guess it's called a lake locally. I don't know if that's called Chappaqua Lake locally or whatever it's called on the west side. It's
Is
right
that the duck pond?
Duck pond, yeah,
Is it the duck pond? Is
Duck
that
pond?
the term that's used? Locally,
Okay.
I should know that, but there certainly were Canada geese there, I'll tell you that much. I don't know about ducks, but I watched them waddling across their driveway.
It's known as the duck pond.
Okay, well, I'll
And
call it the
it's-
geese pond for a moment, but that being said, so their property located on the west side of the of Quaker Street I'll call it immediately north or northwest of the duck pond. Duck
Okay.
pond is fed by a stream which goes under their driveway, which is located here. And their house is located in the southern portion of the property. What is being proposed here, maybe I can zoom in if I can figure out how to do that. What is being proposed here is really two things. One is to create a new porch entry into the house, and second, to actually construct a second floor addition above the existing house within the footprint of the house. So the only impact here is it's approximately, I guess I calculated 47 square feet of the expansion of the existing flagstone landing, which is here, into a new proposed porch and entry to into the house.
So that existing pink hatched area that says 1.5 story frame, that's all within the existing footprint of the house?
Yes, this is the footprint of the house. It's sort of shown with that hatch line. So this addition is going up and only in the up direction, and it's totally within the footprint of the house.
Gotcha.
And I do have some photographs. Maybe I can show these as well.
It's probably one of the more photographed houses in town, I would guess.
Perhaps you can see this. This is the this is the location of the new porch and entry.
Uh-huh.
That's actually the mitigation area, which I'll show you afterwards. But that's the location of it. I should go back and just point out that the 100-foot buffer off the stream and off the, I'll call it the duck pond and not lake, actually encompasses the entire house and a good portion of the rear yard.
Yep.
And actually the front door of the house is actually only 18 feet from the property line and pretty much 18 feet from the pond. So that's what we have here. So this is, I didn't show it on the plan, but this is probably about 40 feet from the porch to the property line and probably about 50 feet to the pond itself.
Do you have any pictures of the property from across the pond? Like from Quaker Road?
Let me see, just
I think we're probably all generally familiar with the area, but
I probably do. Just bear with me for a moment, please.
How long have you guys lived in the house?
We moved in October of 2020. It's been wonderful. We love it, and we have a 2-year-old daughter and another baby on the way. So
Yeah, wonderful.
That's close to being.
gotcha. Okay.
That's close to being the view from it. Actually, the pond, the duck pond is here.
Right there.
Driveway there. There's this grassy area here. And, you know, the house is here and that new porch would be, you know, entry would be there. There's actually a freestanding garage here.
Mhm.
So I think that's probably the only one I have that really shows it well.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's probably standing about here.
Yep.
As you can see also, the property line is very, very close to the edge of the driveway. So although this is actually fairly well vegetated, but because it's owned by the Westchester County, it's not really a place to do any form of mitigation.
Right. It's almost like a flag lot.
Yeah, in a way, it's somewhat like that, except it's a relatively wide flag. But that being said, this area is all lawn, which drains down towards the stream, which discharges into the lake or the pond or the duck pond. So this was the area I thought for mitigation would be reasonable because it'll provide somewhat of a riparian buffer to the watercourse. The watercourse itself here, the stream, is actually stone lined here, and actually it's pretty stone lined along the lake, the pond too. But
Does that stream flow down from across Quaker?
I'm trying to remember how far it goes here.
It flows from across Quaker and meets one that flows down along the side of Quaker as well.
Yeah, because we had done significant work over several years with part of one of those streams across the street. So I'm not surprised. Yeah. Yep.
That's how it shows here.
Yeah.
And this is the property right here.
Yeah, that area that has a slight diagonal on the property across the street. We had gotten involved in restoration of the stream bank and structure over a few years.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, this is it here, and you can see, you call it the duck pond, that's fine.
Yep.
Anyway, so if there are any, and as I noted before, that area where I was sort of considering for mitigation is really along here. This little strip here, because this entire lawn area drains toward the water course here. And on the opposite side, I guess you can't see it here, but on the opposite side, as I said, the property line is like really close to the driveway, and there just really isn't an opportunity to do anything here.
Sure.
Because that was the first place I looked to see, thinking this would be a great place to do mitigation, right along the edge. But it's hard enough to get involved with trying to plant on county land, and I thought this is not an unreasonable place to put. The term I use is a riparian buffer to better protect the water course from any inputs.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's any questions, comments?
Dennis, what do you think of what Alan's planning there?
Makes sense. No, it's reasonable. I mean, you know, we're not going to start removing stone and restoring, you know, natural shoreline, right? I mean, that's
Right.
insane. So the only comment I was going to make to the owners is that on the wall opposite of the proposed mitigation, so I think there was some multi-floor rows, and I think that there was some like vinage that kind of like was doing its suspended hang, like, you know, in the vicinity of the water line. I would just try to keep that maintained and cut as best you can going forward, because you don't want that
Great.
to catch anything before it enters, you know, through the culvert underneath that head wall. You know, you don't want any of the water to back up because it's getting caught up on nothing's whatever's rooted is above that wall, but it's some of the branches that, you know, want to overhang into the stream. If I own the house, I would look to sort of just cut that away, you know, kind of not remove the entire shrubs, just cut away the overhang that's in the
Yeah.
stream corridor, just so that there's more of an open alleyway. That was all.
That's great. And thank you for saying that. That's something that we've been eyeing, and we were looking to do work on this spring. So I appreciate the feedback.
Your upstream neighbors will thank you. Yeah. In addition to your own.
Sure they will.
Okay. Great. Well, again, we apologize for the delay due to tonight's weather, but not seeing anything in the way of substantive comments or questions other than what you just heard from Dennis. I think that, like the others, we're in a position that we'll be able to move forward with this pretty rapidly at the next meeting and approve what you want to do, and so that you can get started.
We have an expiration date because of the pregnancy, so that's helpful. Thank you.
It's coming quite quickly.
It always does.
Yep.
It does. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks,
We
everyone.
appreciate
Nice
your
to meet
time.
you all.
Yes.
Thank you. I really
Okay, we'll
appreciate
see
it.
you
Thank
next
you.
month. Thanks very much. Hmm. 287 Croton Dam Road.
Ready when you are.
We're there. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm Steve Marino, Principal and Senior Wetland Scientist at Tim Miller Associates. With me this evening is Maureen Fisher, my associate, as well as Chris Diaz is online as well, I believe.
Welcome.
Yep. We're here this evening to clear up a violation on a property on the north side of Croton Dam Road. Back some time ago, Mr. Diaz did some landscape work, cleaning up some dead and smaller trees on the slope at the back of his property, and brought in some fill material to kind of level off an area that was a little bit wild at the rear of the property. And after that time, became aware of the fact that he was working in a wetland buffer. There's a small stream at the back of the property on the northern edge of his property parcel. And he was informed by the town that he was in fact in violation. So we've been working with Dennis and Mr. Diaz to come up with a solution for rectifying that violation, and putting together a restoration plan for the areas that were disturbed, that would meet the town, satisfy the town in terms of restoration of the area, and accomplish some landscaping goals that Mr. Diaz had. If I could share my screen, please.
Sure.
Thank you. Come on, mouse. That's not what I wanted. There we go. Okay. This is the Westchester County GIS mapping for the area. 287 Croton Dam Road is this parcel right here. It's one of the few areas of Croton Dam Road where the houses are relatively close together. Mr. Diaz's property is a narrow and long parcel, just over an acre in size. You can see from the county mapping that there is in fact a watercourse at the rear of the property. The darker green here is the NWI mapping, National Wetland Inventory mapping of the property. There are no state wetlands on the parcel. And hydric soils also don't show up on the mapping as being present in the area. So essentially what Mr. Diaz has, and I will close this and get my other, I have to unshare. Okay. This is the rear of his property as it currently exists with the, as you can see, some trees have been cleared out, some smaller trees, dead trees. Some fill was brought in and leveled off and grass planted on it.
If you're showing pictures, we don't see
Yeah,
them.
we have.
Oh, you're not seeing that? I'm
No, we
sorry.
don't see that.
No, not yet.
Okay. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So here's the rear of the property. The 100-foot line for the wetland buffer is just beyond this oak tree here, and that's the Diaz home in the rear of the shot.
So the
Again,
foreground is all buffer in that.
Foreground, well, the buffer is actually behind you. The wetland is actually behind. In this shot here, you can see the house is to the left and the water course is at the bottom of the slope to the right. And as the fill ends at the bottom of the slope, you can see that it's densely vegetated. The stream corridor itself is actually about 30 feet beyond the toe of the slope here into that dense vegetation. So a portion of the buffer has remained densely vegetated all this time, but there is this area approximately 30 to 100 feet from the brook that was cleared and filled and seeded. So the site is currently stable.
Prior to the clearing, did the cleared portion look like what's in the back?
No, not entirely. It was, again, some small dead trees, some small thin trees, and grass underneath. Okay. Let's see. So we have come up with a plan. Maureen met with Dennis and Mr. Diaz on the property. They went through some ideas, looked at the site. I believe it was the consensus that to take the fill out at this time would create more disturbance and potential erosion and other issues than was really necessary. If back in those photos, you can see that the depth to the roots of the existing trees that remain is not deep. You can actually see where the roots protrude out from the bottom. So there isn't a lot of fill back there, but it was enough to grade it out and flatten it some, clear it and level it off. So at this time, what we've done is we've prepared a planting plan that shows native plantings back in that area. What we've done is we've placed some trees on either side, pin oaks and red maples. And then we're using some upland shrubs, low shrub, and then medium-sized shrubs. So we have low bush blueberry at the top of the slope, spirea or meadowsweet halfway down the slope in a few different masses across the slope as we go down. And at the bottom, as we get closer to the stream corridor, the red osier dogwoods. That in combination with a slope mix that has a number of grass and wildflower species in it. This would then become a once or twice a year mowing area in order to maintain that meadow. It's not anybody's plan to return this back to lawn. We understand where the regulated areas are and where they are not now. So that would become a meadow with some shrubs and trees planted on either side of that. We've provided a deer protection detail as requested by Dennis. The species that are included in the grass mix, the wildflower mix, we've provided that as well. The total area that was disturbed and will be replanted is about 6,000 square feet. You can see as you move to the south on the property towards the house, a number of trees remain. So it wasn't a wholesale clearing of the property or anything like that. It was just clearing of some brush and small trees. And now we look to restore that area with some native plantings.
Are you proposing any sort of identification between the no-mow and the lawn area?
Boulders or something like that to make it clear to
In the past,
landscape?
we've used boulders, we've used post and rail fences, we've used signage. I remember I've worked with Steve Coleman a number of times over the years, and we had signs prepared that could be staked on the property to delineate the 100-foot buffer line for this and future property owners. So we'd be open to consideration of some kind of demarcation like that for sure.
Okay, but you haven't discussed that with Dennis, and he hasn't?
We have not to this date, not that I'm aware of that. We discussed that with Dennis, no.
And
Dennis,
everybody's comfortable that any of the fill around the existing trees, nothing needs to be done about that, that the trees are okay as is?
That's certainly my opinion. The trees that are remaining are very shallow in fill, if any fill. So I don't have any concerns about the health of those trees moving forward.
Yeah, was there additional fill brought in for the areas that are outside the buffer?
Judging from the photographs, there was not. It may have been raked out and seeded. But once you get past that line which is a pretty clear line in the field as to where the fill ended and the native soils began, it's pretty clear out there that we're working right at the edge of where that happened.
Okay.
And I would leave that up to Dennis. I mean, I've been out there a couple of times. Maureen and Dennis have been out there a few times as well. So I'm happy to hear their opinion on that, but that's my understanding of the situation.
Dennis, you want to give us a little background on it?
Sure. So, I guess we had received a call from DEP. So that's how the complaint initially came into us. And I know they had an open building permit to do work on the structure, but you know, we didn't have anything on the filling and grading side. So you know, by the time that we got there to investigate, I don't think we, you know, the applicant could tell me different. I don't think we short-circuited anything. It appeared that I think the fill that was going to be brought onto the property at that point was probably close to completion. Because if they, you know, kept filling, I think they would have run the risk of, you know, probably getting, you know, dangerously close to the stream. And I didn't think that was their intent. As Mr. Diaz said, he wanted to, you know, extend as best he could, you know, what the level areas of the property. And I guess, you know, outside of putting in, you know, tiered or retaining type walls, then as I call it, the Olay method works, where you just, you know, pour it down the side and Olay, wherever it ends up is wherever it ends up. So at that point we had, you know, as DEP was involved, we had to issue a violation. And I think this is still, this is in the zone. I can't remember because we vetted this, because these are not R2A parcels. I can't remember if this area was 100 or 150 foot buffer. But regardless, I think all the work, as Steve mentioned, is certainly within the buffer. And having been at the property just last week, there is a bit of a dividing line that you could see in the property proper, as to kind of like what looks older and what looks newer in terms of the ground cover, the turf cover. From looking at aerials prior to the work as best I could, I would agree. I mean, there were some trees that were smaller that were likely able to be pushed over, but you know, I'm not really anything of size that you're able to pick up in the GIS aerials. You know, there was probably some overgrowth as well. So at this point, you know, by the time we got out there later in the game, yeah, the area is now stabilized as lawn, with some, you know, there's you know, they used some erosion control netting and obviously like a lawn seat to sort of stabilize that. As far as other permits that they're going to require in addition to the wetlands, so they did submit a building permit application simultaneously with this wetlands application. So that's going to be for filling and grading for our review. The back of the property is partially mapped as 15 to 25% steep slope, so they may have to get involved with Bob Cioli, the town engineer, for steep slopes permit as well. That would be determined or mentioned as part of Tom's review letter after he reviews the application and, you know, submits that to the applicant. Prior to getting to the mitigation, I was just curious. So this submission of the laboratory results, so we appreciate that, because obviously, you know, needing to sort of have an idea as to, you know, what the fill was, at least, you know, chemically. And I'm presuming that, you know, these results, I mean, my understanding is the comparison for me is to this Part 375 environmental remediation programs from 2006, where they list a number of tables for a variety of parameters where they have, in essence, their quote unquote cleanup levels. I know this is not a cleanup site or a remediation site, but the protection standards that they have, like for protection of public health, they'll have, you know, what acceptable levels are for, you know, a residential setting. They have numbers for protection of ecological resources and groundwater. And what was submitted seems to be below, you know, all of those results. The only comment that I had was, for me,
So
the parameter that,
you're saying the fill
Yeah,
is
the-
contaminated.
right, no, I'm saying the results indicated that it's not.
Right.
To me, the only results that were missing that I would have had some interest in is it didn't appear, or I didn't see any results for any semi-volatiles. And from judging from the lab report, you probably exceeded the holding times for those samples, or sample. And I'm okay with that frequency. I think I used to recall it was 1 for every 500 yards. And for our quick math in the office, we were trying to guesstimate. We were probably thought you were maybe in the 550 range, 600 range. Just trying to, you know, go area and depth. So I'm okay with just one sample, but at least for the, you know, building permit component as well, you know, we would be interested in, you know, at least for the 11 semi-volatiles, I think it was 11 that are included in this listing. I think we would want to see those results too, to just sort of put a lid on that. So that was like my only comment with respect to the laboratory results that I had an opportunity to review. I was accepting of the plan as designed with the mix of planting some trees and shrubs. My comments that I had from walking the site recently were more of a sort of housekeeping or maintenance now that we're sort of going forward. So, like for example, the silt fencing that was put in, you know, way back whenever, obviously, I think, you know, that could be potentially at a point where it at a minimum, it could be removed. If you think it's necessary to put in more silt fencing for the plantings, then, you know, you'd probably need another layer. I'm not sure if that's really necessary per se. So that was just one example. The other area that I had noticed, so if you go prior to reaching the stream, there seems to be this expression seep area. I think you I don't know if you're familiar with the property, you might know what I'm talking about. It's kind of in that northeastern corner. Towards the stream. It's like it definitely seems to be wet. I mean, like I stepped and, you know, definitely sank, and that's fine. I mean, I don't think it was not filled in. I don't think it was bigger than it was, but my only housekeeping comment would be is that it's obvious that it still has like that, I'll call it like a gritty, fine sand veneer that likely is reflective of the wash that came from the olay of the fill. So that's something that I would look to just sort of just gently rake out that veneer, and then frankly, you could toss it back on the hill or use it as, you know, backfill as part of the planting. So I figured maybe that would happen first and then remove the silt fence second, but that was sort of my intention, the detail sort of on that side.
In all honesty, Dennis, if I could interrupt just a second there, you know, you've been out the site a few times, so you know that there's over time, there's been some activity on properties both north and south of this one, as well as west of this one. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that in the neighborhood that there might be some erosion sediments accumulated on either side of this stream as you move forward. Certainly this stream meanders from time to time and deposits some of that stuff on either side. So, but yeah, we would certainly, I can add to the list of things to go in and clean some of that accumulated material
Yeah,
out.
'cause- and again, I'm talking about areas that are just to the quote unquote inside of the silt fencing. So that's why, in my opinion, it was more likely to come from this property. To the
Sure.
other side
Okay.
of the silt fence, I agree. There's all type. I'm not looking to go there because I know there's a stream that runs through there, and
Yep.
yes, that carries its sins with it. So I'm not. So that definitely, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not looking to attribute anything beyond what I think is just associated with this property.
Understood. Thank you.
I had seen it. It wasn't a big deal, but it was just more of a sort of messaging going forward. As you, I guess, approach sort of where the slope starts to descend, it looked like fairly recent. Wasn't that big, but it was like a small pile of like brick and concrete and soil that just had gotten, deposited there. I would just, ask maybe that be removed. It didn't look older or remnant. I mean, obviously it was placed after all this area has been stabilized, so I'm not sure what the purpose of that was, but just not to sort of continue that
Okay.
sort of operation going forward. Let's see. Some of the erosion control netting, I think there's opportunity to cut some of that away. And if you look at spots where, like, for example, the netting was kind of like, you're going down a slope and it was like looped over like a boulder. And then to the other side of the boulder, there's a bit of a void, and then it continues, flat to the ground again. So you have this area that it's just a net and like a void behind it. So I think where the net is not performing any function, and there's another spot where there was like a tree root that actually breached and is like lifted the net. And in similar fashion, all that it is it appears to be netting that is pressed up against the tree root. So again, that's more of like a maintenance or a housekeeping thing. But when I see those areas, I just don't want like critters to sort of get impinged up in there. So where we can
Sure.
cut it where it's breached, that was kind of my comment with respect to the site of that. And then the only remaining issue was so the tree that you have identified on the plan as 38 inches. It's underneath the red number that goes 491.8. If that makes sense. It's a fairly large tree. It looks like some of its canopy encroaches into the fill area, so it's by the back.
Yes, I see it. Yep.
The green dot. Yep. Okay. So that's a red oak that is in decline. Definitely some dead branching. The woodpeckers have started to make work of it, and it's just it's difficult based on its proximity and in consideration of I'm not saying it was necessarily filled over, but not knowing the traversing back and forth and
Right.
What other impacts it may or may not have suffered. At this point, it's close enough that the other trees that I guess to David's point, even that are in the fill, looks as though that they almost paid attention to, or maybe after the fact, like cleared some of the fill away to create like a pseudo tree well. And I'm not saying that tree necessarily needed that based on its growing condition in relation to the fill, but its condition in terms of its health and proximity to the fill, not having any previous knowledge of its condition, I don't know what to consider. So that's something that, obviously you're not required to remove that tree. It's on your property, but I'm going to need to sort of somehow capture that in terms of sort of a replacement diameter replacement planting, just to sort of account for if it can, it's going to continue on the path that I think it's going to. It's going to die. You obviously don't need a permit to remove a dead tree, but obviously we don't want to. You don't want to create this situation where it's that, no, the tree's dead, I'm allowed to remove it. It's like, yeah, but I saw you girdle it 6 months ago and, you know,
Right, right.
you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you did
Understood,
that, but
yeah.
that's just my example. Right, exactly.
So,
So,
yeah, we're gonna be out there this spring when the planting goes on and stuff, and after leaf breaks, so we'll take a close look at that tree and see what kind of condition it's in.
okay. So, and I would say, I mean, I know it's only February now, so I would say my only comment would be is to at least just so that one doesn't step on the other. As I said, sort of at the start, whatever may be required from Tom, who's the building inspector, or Bob as the engineer, if indeed it's any concerns over steep slopes and, you know, whatever that slope grade, you know, percentage would be, if it's fine, then nothing to worry about. If there's some minor amending to it that needs to occur per Bob's, you know, requirements in accordance with chapter 108, obviously I would recommend you do that first before you do any planting.
Right, of
So,
course, yeah,
if it's
very good.
necessary, that's all. Yep.
Okay.
Dennis, did you have any thoughts as to, following up on David's point, what might be the appropriate way to delineate the planting area to make sure that the no-mow or the almost no-mow remains that way, and that landscapers are, you know, on clear notice as to where they should stop the lawn area? You think a fence is necessary, or do you think that?
Yeah, there's any. Well, it's funny because some of it is on, you know, fairly decent slope, right? So there's a good physical impedance, but no, I mean there obviously should be a demarcation of that. Now, I mean, if they're going to do, you know, one of those mixes, you know, there's going to be certain requirements to, you know, sort of keep it or try to promote that
Right.
meadow community. So, I mean, from the perspective of this, you know, it's going to be, I think, a dual purpose. It's going to be one, herbivory protection, but two, I think you're going to need some kind of access egress so that, you know, if you do need to mow it once, twice a year, that, you know, there is at least a swing gate to have somebody be able to get through and just mow, you know, obviously not the woody plantings, but, you know, just to sort of, you know, get the meadow.
You know,
Would it be okay then if at this time, you know, after this meeting, I'll get together with my client, we'll talk about options for doing that. Like you say, Dennis, something that you can get through as necessary for maintenance, but that makes it pretty clear that this is kind of a, you know, a no-mow zone, a no-mow, and a low maintenance area, so to speak. So we'll come up with some ideas and maybe present it at the next meeting.
right. I mean,
Yeah, that's fine. I mean,
Steve,
people have put in some pretty robust deer fencing that, you know, kind of accommodates that. So yeah, you'll have options available to you. So that's fine. Yep.
I
Okay,
mean,
thanks.
Steve, to tell you the truth, in the past, sometimes discussion about these kinds of things has turned in part on, you know, especially since this is a situation where we're dealing with a violation as opposed to, you know, an applicant coming to us with completely clean hands for a permit. You know, the discussion has turned in part on Dennis's, you know, the environmental coordinator's sense of the property owner's intent and good faith going forward. You know, obviously, if there's a sense that this wasn't, you know, an unintentional mistake and that there is complete good faith going forward, then maybe the, you know, the demarcation does not have to be, you know, as striking, if you will, or as, you know, as much of a barrier. And maybe we
Okay.
can get away with, you know, several large boulders that would not impede access for the limited mowing purposes, but would make it clear to, you know, any landscaper that, you know, that this is a different area. but I guess that's something that we can leave to Dennis and discussions with you between now and the next time, because, you know, as he said, there is still work to be done on this before we can think about issuing the permit and before the violation gets cleared.
Okay,
All right,
yep, thank you.
all right. Anybody have anything else on this? No? Okay. Steve, thank you very much.
Right then, thank you.
I guess that's it for the agenda tonight, right? Anything else we need to talk about, Dennis?
Jill, I sent her an email when you requested that maybe we could try to push that ERB meeting with the town board regarding the Upper Minkle Dam, because I think they originally had you scheduled
While I'm still away.
right, well, March 21st, March whatever. So I didn't receive a response. I will ring the bell tomorrow and just see if there was any, you know, maybe she, you know, didn't even see the email. I know she gets a lot. So I will check in with that. And I did have a conference call Friday with the consultant in Westchester County regarding the Upper Minkle Dam, and they did sort of check back in with me because they said, you know, Dennis, you were going to loop back with the ERB. And I said, yes. They said, we're actually supposed to sit down with the town board in March, possibly April. We're trying to coordinate that meeting so that everybody is there live. And, you know, which I think you and I were speaking about over the phone a bit, John. Part of what I wanted to coordinate was this. I certainly want a coordinated review. But in terms of that, you know, is this something that kind of goes through, you know, in consideration of the purpose and need, which is the dam is coming out and there's a large subaquatic environment that is going to be drained and turned into a, you know, a wetland. It's not going to be a pond anymore. And obviously that decision, you know, has been made, you know, for safety reasons, that that dam cannot stay anymore, and to bring it into compliance is going to cost whatever it was, 3 or 4 times as much as it would be to remove it. And frankly, from a habitat perspective, it's better to restore it as wetland than to keep it as an impounded flow through pond situation. But what, you know, they were trying to get out of me, both the county and our consultant Tectonic, was that, you know, would it be a permit issued by the ERB, and then could we get the application in? And so I was trying to just basically say, well, you know, I thought of this, and this is what I wanted to discuss with you guys. You know, when we used to do Superfund work, we would complete applications, in this one case, let's say for the New Jersey DEP, because they were the state agency, and there was maybe wetlands permit that was required, and we needed flood hazard area, whatever. And we completed those applications and we submitted to the department for review. The term for that was always an equivalency review, because you don't need, you know, state permits to proceed with federal actions. And it was a courtesy.
Yep.
And the EPA and Corps certainly took their comments. In some cases, they acknowledged comments, and in other cases, they said, we're not doing that. And for whatever reason, and that was that. So my point was, for something like this, because it's not a question of that any decision is going to be made with respect to a go, no go for the project, but more of an advisory, you know, and valid comment throughout the process. You know, is it necessary for something that's going to be so high profile, is going to be noticed, is going to be presented before the town board? Is it necessary to go through this chapter, you know, 137, procedure, like, are we sending out certified mailings? Are we, actually filling out an application? Are we actually issuing, a permit with conditions that, so
Well,
when
that's,
this is-
that's something that I would actually, maybe you should talk to Drew about,
okay, perfect.
you know?
If
But
you're not
that
averse,
kind of-
I'd be happy to.
But I would analogize it more to a situation, and it kind of dovetails with something that I had wanted to talk to you a little, a little bit about. And maybe we can shut off the recording at this point.
That's fine. If you want to close the meeting, that's,
Well, it's not a formal meeting.
right, okay.
So, so we cannot formally go?
Go home?
I mean, get off, go have dinner?
You're still here till March 20th, yeah.
We can,
You
dinner?
can. Ted, you absolutely can.
Okay.
There's something that I've wanted to raise with Dennis for a little while, just procedurally. And if you want to go, go. It doesn't have to do with anything that's on the agenda tonight, certainly.
All right. Well, have a good night.
Thanks. You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, and good luck with the snow. So Dennis, the question was, what I would analogize this to is a situation that we used to get into a lot, where a project would be before the planning board, and they would come to us, as they were required to do under 137, for kind of advisory opinions on the wetland aspects of something that was before the planning board. For some reason, over the last couple of years, maybe it's since Steve left and you came, we haven't been doing any of that. And I'm just wondering, I can't imagine that there haven't been the planning board applications with wetland issues. Was there a formal determination made by somebody that, notwithstanding what the 137 reads, that the planning board wasn't interested in our input?
Nothing official, and I agree that in my time here, they certainly have kept up that referencing applications on occasion to the zoning board of appeals for whatever, but yeah, I haven't, there have been some wetland applications, mostly they were, new houses within lots of subdivisions that were already approved, and they just never got to constructing, on a final lot or something to that effect.
We used to look at a lot of those. We used to look at a lot of those.
Yeah.
Those subdivisions over on the east side of town off 128. I remember, we used to regularly give planning board input when they were issuing permits for those last lots. We did in, I remember we did in what is it, Carolyn Place, the last lots on Carolyn Place we were involved in, even though those were planning board and really not our permits.
Right. So would Steve, because obviously I have to generate, these memos to the planning board, per my reviews, would Steve recommend in the memo this should go to the ERB, or was it something that came through the discussion and then the planning board said, I believe we should reference this to the...
No, it came to us before that stage.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, then I'm, okay. Okay, I'm new to that. Okay.
And then Steve would, in lieu of a permit application, Steve would prepare a memo with the results of our conversation and whatever suggestions we had.
I have come across those. Yes. Yes. Okay. So that's how you guys got involved. It was even pre. Okay. That I didn't realize.
Right.
In terms of the timing.
I mean, I'm happy to go into it and find you the specific section in 137, but if you look at it, you can probably find it easily yourself too.
So when they become the approving authority, though, the planning board, and the application goes to them. So this wasn't a case of where it started with the ERB and then as a
No.
result of discovery. Okay. Yeah.
No, this is where it was known from the beginning that that the jurisdiction is with the planning board.
Wow. Okay.
You know, because of other aspects of the project, but they come to us. You know, I mean, that's the reason that we used to do, you know, frequently we would do joint site visits with them. You know, the most recent one we did was over on Sorrel Street with the ex Mrs. Bloomberg's property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a big one. Yep.
So, you know, just a question.
No, I'll obviously I'll probably talk to Bob and Sabrina and say, you know, gee, you guys were, you know, here for this. What, you know, John brought up a good point. I'm just curious why nothing's happened like that in my time here. Is it, you know, is it something that I'm supposed to do, you know, better job of promoting if I feel it's appropriate, or just has the board not done it as much for whatever reason? I'm curious now.
Okay. Good, and I'll look at, you know, I'll look at the ordinance and I'll get you the specific section reference.
Okay, thank
that
you.
Talks about it. All right,
Okay.
Excellent.
good.
That was a long one.
But
It was.
productive.
Yes, considering we didn't do any business, it was very productive.
Exactly.
We're gonna fly through the next meeting. You'll see. Approved. Go home.
Yeah, now there are going to be 5 more before the next one. So Dennis, I also wanted to ask you, I mean, it's curious that the last several months, we seem to have a bunch of these projects where all they want to do is, you know, is decks and patios. Did we scare them off doing anything else in the way of construction in the buffer?
Let's
Or
hope so.
Did you scare them off?
I am very open with people that, you know, want to come forward, mostly with pools and, you know, basketball courts and whatever. There's a couple that have been built that we found that were like, you know, trying to advance, you know, we got the complaints in and going to issue violations. I'm like, you got to remove these, you know, or at least try to legalize them. But yeah, no, it's been mostly what you see here, small additions and decks and yeah.
Uh-huh. All right.
Nobody's dredging anything. I definitely scared people in terms of the dredging, you know, or, you know, looking to, you know, do stuff that requires other agencies other than Newcastle. I'm like, you know, gee, you know, it's not just a question of going in there with an excavator and scooping out to your desired, you know, appearance. It takes a little bit more than that. And I direct them to what's required for the state and the Corps in addition to us. I think that's made some people go the other way. That's been my opinion.
Although Ivan probably misses talking about projects like that.
Yeah.
Ivan's the expert. So, all right.
All right, well, enjoy the sunshine, Jonathan, the snow to you, David and Dennis, and
Yeah, I just checked my outdoor cameras. Looks like it's coming down pretty good.
is that right? I can't see out there. I want to go look.
Yeah.
Well, if we stay on a few more minutes, it'll only be down to 1 inch accumulation, so it's worth it.
All right. All right,
All
guys.
right, guys.
All right, everybody.
care.
Nice seeing.
Good to see you. We'll see you next month.
Okay.